Hola chicos, bienvenidos al Chalk and Talk. Today we are talking about the should haves, could haves and would haves. Oughts and maybe deber. Okay, and this has been requested by Claire Ashplant. Hello Claire, hola Claire. And it's interesting because we've already done the coulds, haven't we? We've looked at the coulds. And this kind of forms part of the coulds. It's an extension to the coulds. But when we get into the could have and the would have and the should have, okay? So first of all, before we get into the haves, we need to be sure we understand what the could, would and should is all about. How do we make could, would and should in Spanish? Well, first of all, let's just review the could, okay? The could comes from the verb to can, to be able, yes? Which is poder. So to could is podría, yeah? So I could, podría hacerlo, I could do it, yeah? So that's could. Then we've got should. Now should comes from must, the verb to must, which is deber, okay? But must is very strong, deber is very strong. So what happens is when you make it into the conditional, it softens into should. So that becomes debería. Yeah, so debería hacerlo. I should do it. Deberías hacerlo tú. You should do it. Debería hacerlo él. Deberíamos hacerlo. Deberíais hacerlo. Deberían hacerlo. Yeah, so that's just the standard conjugation, the endings. So that's the should. So that's the could, the should, and then the would. Now, the issue with the would is that it doesn't exist. There is no would in English. What happens in Spanish, I should say, in English there is, yeah? Because we can say, yeah, I would, yeah, I would, yeah? But that you can't do that in Spanish because would is made by putting ia on the end of a verb. I always talk about the wooden ear. Remember the wooden ear, because when you want to make would, you have to put ear on the verb. So that's how you make a would. So for example, I would eat is comer with ear on the end, so comería. Or I would talk is hablaría. Or I would go is iría. Yeah, so it's just a verb with the endings on. Remember that, or with the conditional, all of the verbs, particularly the go verbs, the verbs that have go in the first person, they will tend to be irregular. So you've got like tengo, tener, tengo is tendría. It isn't tenería. Salgo from salir isn't saliría, it's saldría. Yeah, so all of the go ones tend to be irregular in not only in the conditional, but in this future, you know, come, for example, saldré, you don't say saliré, yeah? So watch out for those. All right, so if you want to make a would, then you need to add ear onto the verb. So there isn't a way of saying I would. Because really what you're saying, if somebody says, hey, would you eat the hottest chili in the world? I don't know if I would, and you could say, well, I would. But in Spanish, you would have to say, pues yo lo haría. I would do it. Or, sí, yo lo comería. I would eat it. So you've got to go for your verb. There is no would on its own. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so now, once you understand the would, could, and should, okay, then you can easily take a step forward into the would have, could have, and should have. Okay, so let's do it. You see, there's a thing that if you keep this in mind, it makes it so much easier when you're working with Spanish. When you hear the word have, okay, and it's when you hear the word have followed by the past participle. Right, what's the past participle? In English, the done, gone, eaten, spoken. These are the past participles, yeah? When you hear that have with the past participle, you know that that have is haber, yeah? So when you say, I would have gone, see, we've got a have gone. I would have eaten. I should have spoken. I could have killed him. Okay? So this is the trigger that you're in haber. You're not in tener. Right? Tener is not about that. Tener is about possession. And haber is about having done something. Yeah? That's the difference. Okay. So let's look at I could have eaten it. Right? So could, we know, is podría. Okay? Could. So all that you have to do is, the structure is identical. Could have. So you just say, podría haber comido eso, for example. Right? I could have eaten that. Podría haber comido eso. So, if you want to put an it in there, because that's I could have eaten that. But if you want to say I could have eaten it, where are we going to put our it? Okay. Well, we've got two options. We can say lo podría haber comido. So we could put the lo at the front, or we can put the lo after haber. And we could say podría haberlo comido. Yeah. Now it's interesting because the normal rule is that you must not put anything between haber and the past participle. That's the normal rule. But when it's conjugated, because it's the same old rule, isn't it? You can't put anything on the end of a conjugated verb. You can't put any pronoun on. But this is haber in its entirety, yeah, in the infinitive form. So you're going to add a lo. So lo podría haber comido, or podría haberlo comido. Okay? Could have. Yeah, podría haber. And obviously go through the persons. Yo podría haberlo comido. Tú podrías haberlo comido. Él podría haberlo comido. So it's just the usual thing. So that's could have. Now we've got should have. Okay? Should have is yo debería. Now we know should is debería. What do? Exactly the same. We add haber. All right, because we've conjugated debería, so we add haber in its infinitive. And you say, for example, I should have called him. Okay? I should have called the school. Better, let's start with that, yeah? So, debería haber llamado a la escuela. Mm-hmm. So, debería haber llamado a la escuela. Okay, or I should have called him. Now we've got a lo. Call is direct, so it's debería haberlo llamado. O lo debería haber llamado. So, debería haberlo llamado o lo debería haber llamado. Both the same. So, debería haber, I should have. Podría haber, could have. Right? And now all we're missing is a would have. Would have. So now we don't have to have, remember, would is made just by adding ir onto the verb. So what we're doing is we're adding ir onto haber. Now our haber is slightly irregular. So instead of habería, it's habría. Yeah? And habría is would have. I would have. Habría, habrías, habría, habríamos, habríais, habrían. Okay? So, I would have told you, right? What's that now? Is anybody hearing alarm bells? I would have told you. Full stop. In English, can't do that in Spanish because it's the told you it. Can you remember? The it, you've got to put an it in there. So, what would that be? I would have told you. So it could be, te lo habría dicho. So habría dicho, I would have told. Yeah? Or habría, no, it has to be, there's no option. You can't put the pronouns on the end now. So te lo habría dicho. It's the only option we've got. Okay? I would have told you it. Me lo habrías dicho. You would have told me it. Yeah? So, what have we got? We've got could have, podría haber, plus the past participle. Would have, habría, with plus the past participle. And should have, debería haber, plus the past participle. Okay? That's it. Would have, should have, and could have. Remember, if you have a pronoun, you must put the pronoun either beforehand, okay, remember the prid rule, beforehand, or after haber, if haber is in its infinitive form. Okay? Right, now, just let's finish off by looking at ought. Okay, because ought is a funny little verb. But it's kind of like an auxiliary verb almost. It helps along other verbs. Because we'll say, for example, we'll say, I ought to have done that. Or I ought to do it. So it has to bolt onto another verb. Normally, I mean, you can say, yeah, I ought to. But that's that feel, the same feel as I would do. You know, this in Spanish you have to put the verb on. Okay, so ought, really ought is, all that ought is doing is debería, should. If you say, I ought to have phoned him, really what you're saying is I should have phoned him, which is what? What is I should have called him? Work it out, I'll give you a second, and then I'll tell you. The answer is, debería haberlo llamado o lo debería haber llamado. Okay? So if you want to do the ought, just think about ought in terms of debería and you'd be pretty okay with that. I ought to do it. Debería hacerlo. I ought to do it. Yeah, I should do it. It's the same. Yeah? Okay? So that is all. And just let me leave you with the difference between deber and debería. Okay, deber is must, very strong, not used massively because of its strength, because you're telling somebody you must, there's no way around that. Whereas if you say to somebody, deberías, for example, I could say, debes irte. That's you must go, no question. Deberías irte, you should go. It's just more, it's soft. It's more, yeah, it's soft and it's just a bit of advice. Whereas if you use debes, it's an absolute must. Very strong, yeah. There are lots of other ways of giving people commands or telling people to do something without using debes. Normally, my suggestion is if you're going to use debes, use it on yourself. And then you're not imposing anything on anybody else. You know, debo irme, I have to go, I must go. No choice, yeah? Okay? Vale. I hope that was helpful. Y nos vemos. Y deberíais estudiar esto mucho. Y así podríais usarlo bien. Bien. Hasta luego.